In this video, I'd like to introduce you to Google Jamboard. Now, before we get too far, I want to touch upon the fact that there's actually two particular aspects to the Jamboard. First is a software application, which is kind of like a digital whiteboard. The second is an actual product, like an interactive whiteboard, something like a smartboard or Promethean board that you may be using in your own school or office somewhere. When the Jamboard first came out, the software was really only available to those that had the product. But now Google has made the Jamboard software available to us so we can actually use it independent of this product. And that's what we want to take a look at. What I love about this software is it enables me to have some kind of drawing app available to me independent of the computer I'm at. So I may be at a computer that's connected to an interactive whiteboard or interactive projector, and instead of worrying about what software is available to me, I can just load up a browser, load up this Jamboard software, and I can start writing. In addition, in some cases I may need to be recording my screen for a lesson. And what I can do is if I need to draw for some reason, I can just load up my Jamboard software and I can draw right there while I'm sharing my screen or recording it for a lesson. So regardless of the type of use you may have for it, let's jump in and take a look at its capabilities. But let's also keep in mind it does have some limitations that we're going to need to be okay with. All right, so where do we begin? We're going to start at Google. So I'm going to go to my typical Google page and I'm going to start at the Google app button and I'm going to scroll down till I find Jamboard. Now, if you don't find it available to you, it could be that you don't have access to it. Maybe it's not enabled by your organization. So you'll need to talk to your organization's administrator to figure out how to get access to that. All right, so I'm in Jamboard, and you can see here that I don't see a whole lot of anything. And that's because I haven't created a jam yet. So that's the term we're using for each individual document. They're called jams. So we're going to click this orange plus button, and we're going to create a new jam. Now let's just go through the screen here and see what we have available. You can certainly play around with this. It's very easy to use. I'm going to use each particular aspect and talk about some of the limitations that it has, but you can certainly feel free to play around yourself. Up at the left-hand side, we're going to see a familiar title, and if you're used to your Google products, you can just click that and go ahead and rename it. I'm going to rename mine Demo. Now down here we have an undo button and a redo button. They are grayed out because I haven't done anything yet, but they are available to you. You'll also see that we do have keyboard shortcuts available to us as well. One of the things that you probably want to play around with is a change in background. So if we click the background button, we see we have a variety of choices for our background. Right now we have none, so it's just a white canvas for us. Here we can choose dots. So we have little gray faint dots. We could choose lines or rules. We can choose a grid. So this is like graph paper, blue on white. This is kind of an inverted grid. So we have a light gray on a darker gray. And then we have a blue color here. And then we also have a black background. All right, so these are your options. Now you are limited to these. You cannot customize these colors. So you may find that to be a little bit of a limitation, but I'm satisfied. I can do pretty much everything I need to do with this. And considering the fact that it's free for me and it's right there integrated into my browser, I'm content with what I have. The clear frame button is going to be used to clear the entire frame. So whatever is on my frame, I just click clear frame and it goes away. And that's going to include anything that I've drawn, any images that I've added, and any sticky notes that we'll see I can add. Now let's take a look at the tools that we have over here on the left-hand side. The first is the pen tool. If I click that, what it's going to allow me to do is draw on my frame. Now I'm not seeing very much here because the default pen color is black and my background is black. So if I choose a different background, let's go with the dots here, then we can see my little scribbles there. All right, so let's take a look at the variety of pens that we have before we get into too many other particulars. If you click the pen again, you have the option of changing not only the pen style, but also the color. Now there's several pen styles and several colors available to you. You cannot customize colors at this point, as I mentioned for the background. We do have several pen types. We have the standard pen, which is very thin, as you see here. We have a marker, which is a little thicker, so I'll pick the marker and blue, and we'll see that that's slightly thicker. This is the one I tend to like to use for my jams. We also have a highlighter. Now a highlighter is a little bit different. It's going to have a little bit of transparency to it. So if I click the yellow color with the highlighter and I just drew a stroke over these blue scribbles, you will see the blue scribbles still showing through. Now what I can do is I can keep going over that with my mouse clicked, and after a while it does become more opaque. So after a while I don't even see those strokes underneath. But it can highlight, and the more I do it, the more opaque it becomes. The last pen style is the brush. If I pick the brush, it's going to be very similar to the highlighter. There is a transparency to it. It's a little thicker, and there's more transparency than the highlighter. So if I click and drag, you see that broad stroke. It's very faint. I can still see everything underneath, but I can use it again. Now the difference between this and the highlighter is not only is it more transparent and a little bit thicker, but if I click and hold down and I go over that stroke, it's not becoming more opaque. It's just the same level of transparency as before. If I want that to become more opaque, what I need to do is let go of my mouse button, click it down again, and now the next stroke is going to add another layer of that brush stroke on top. So it's going to become a little bit more opaque each time I do that. And if I keep doing that, releasing my mouse button and clicking down again, then I get more and more opaque the more I do it. So it's going to take quite a while for me to no longer see those thin scribbles here. With the highlighter, all I need to do is do that several times and all of that goes away. Alright, so those are the different pen tools. Now you also have the eraser. You do not have any variety at this point with the eraser. There's just one tool. You can't even pick the different sizes. You just click the eraser and now you can come in here and erase things. Pretty decent size stroke, I think. Kind of in the middle, but there you go. Now if you didn't want to waste all that time erasing, again you can use the clear frame. If I clear that, you'll notice everything goes away and I'm still left with my background. The arrow is the select tool, and this is going to allow me to select various things on my frame. Now it does not allow you to select anything that you have drawn. So for example, if I go to my pen, I'm going to pick red. If I draw something here, if I go to the select tool, I cannot select this and move it around. So if you're used to that feature on an interactive whiteboard piece of software, you're going to be a little bit disappointed you can't move that around. You can erase it, you can clear it, but you're not going to be able to move it. What can you move? Well, they have two different items that you can also add to your frames. This is for the sticky note. Let's go ahead and see how we could create that. Now, why would you use a sticky note? Well, you may just need to post something to a frame or a slide. For example, maybe you are creating this Jamboard ahead of time so that you can put problems on it that just need to be worked out later on your lesson, or maybe there are prompts that you want people to think about ahead of time and then you can draw on the frame later. So this sticky note, I'm just going to put a little problem up for an Algebra 1 class. We'll say find the slope of a line that passes through the points, and we'll say 0, 2, and -2, 0. All right. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the sticky note has a little progress indicator at the bottom, which is essentially a length indicator. It tells you how many characters you have left. It's not an exact thing. Once you get into the red, you can exceed that. It's basically just kind of an indicator to you that this is really getting too long, and when it's displayed on the frame, it may not look right. So I'll show you that in just a moment. But before we get there, let's just review. We do have some color options that you are familiar with, these fluorescent styles. You can choose any one of those. You can also choose none, which is basically going to make it transparent. When I click save, you'll notice that it does go onto my frame, but it is left here for me to create another one. Now I don't want another one, so I can just click cancel, or I can click off of it and I'm brought to the frame. Now if I click on the sticky note, I can drag it around and I can place it wherever I wish. I can also use these handles to do a variety of things. So the handle at the top is a rotate option. So I can rotate left and right whatever I need to do. Now, the one thing I don't really like at this point is there are no snapping features, so I can't snap this to a nice angle. So I kind of have to eyeball it if I want it to be back normal. Otherwise, I can just undo it a few times to get back to the same orientation I had previously. The other tools, the other handles you can use to resize, so I can resize that, but you'll notice it doesn't resize the sticky note and keep the text the same size. It's resizing this as if it is an image, and that's pretty much how it's being treated. Now, that doesn't mean you can't edit it. At the top right, you do have this button here which allows you to edit, duplicate, or delete the sticky note. So if you go into edit, you can go ahead and edit that text. Once you're done, you save it and you're right back here. If you do need to duplicate it, you can do that. But you also have the keyboard shortcuts available to you, Control-C, Control-V, to copy and paste respectively. All right, so we'll go ahead and delete that one. Now what I can do is I can just leave that there for my class, and then when I load this up in class, we can take a look at that and we can just start writing. Now, one of the other things that we can do is we can add more frames. So kind of like slides in a presentation or pages in some kind of interactive notebook software package, we can create new frames. So we can do that in a couple of different ways. Now up here we have the frame indicator. This is going to show us the frames that we have in our jam. We do have some buttons here that allow us to add a frame. We can add one prior to the current frame, or you can add one after the current frame. It's up to you. I can go ahead and create a new one here, or what I can do is I can use this little tool here which allows me to duplicate that slide. So I can duplicate that slide, and now I also have the ability to delete a slide or frame if I wish to. All right. The arrow on the right allows you to scroll through your frames going down. Once you hit the last one, it's grayed out. You can use the other one to scroll up, and once you hit the first one, that is grayed out. You can collapse that again by using that tool or just clicking off. One thing to keep in mind here as well is that these two arrows do allow you to scroll through your frames, but the right arrow, pay close attention to, although I can use it to go to the next frame, if I click it again, it actually becomes a create frame button. So if I needed another frame, if I click this, I'm going to get the next frame. So I'm going to change the background of this one just so I have a little bit of a distinguishing look between these two frames. So now I can tell which is which. And what I'm going to do on this other frame is I'm going to delete the sticky note and I'm going to add an image. So in addition to sticky notes, we can also add images. So we'll take a look at this. This is a very familiar screen if you are a Google user. You will have the ability to upload, do a search for, or select a photo from your Google Drive. I'm going to go ahead and select one from my Google Drive. I have one in my folder here. So I have a picture of a line. All right, and then I can move that around. I can shrink it or rotate it in the same fashion I was able to do that with my sticky note. The options I have here are just duplicate and delete. So if I need another one, I can duplicate it. If I'm done with it, I can delete it. So I'm going to put this up here. I'm also going to add a sticky note with some directions. Maybe this time I'll use green or orange. And I'm going to say, identify the X and Y intercepts. And I'll click Save. And that's going to go up here. I'll resize that, make it a little larger. So now I'm all ready to present this to my class. Now, one last tool you do have down here is a laser pointer. What it allows you to do is click and drag somewhere in your frame, and it's basically temporary. It's just going to go away after a while. So if you're presenting in some sort of meeting or class and you need to direct people's attention to a particular area, you can use that, but it's not going to be added to your frame like a red pen. It's just going to be something that highlights something for a little while, and then it will disappear. So you can use that. Now let's talk a little bit about drawing on different devices. If I was presenting this in an environment that had an interactive whiteboard, that had pens and a board that was touch sensitive, this would be fairly easy for me to work with. All I need to do is pick up that pen, select the pen tool, select a marker color, I'll use blue, and then I can just go ahead and write. If I'm doing this on a computer though, let's say I'm recording this and I'm going to be using it for my students later on, and I don't have a pen attached to my computer, this is going to be a little bit tricky. It's going to require a little bit of practice, especially if you're having your students use this. Perhaps you gave them an assignment and they don't have pen and paper. They need to create a jam with their work on it. Using the mouse is going to be a little bit tricky. Now, it's not impossible. So as a teacher, I wouldn't give them 50 problems and expect them to use the mouse for that whole thing. And if there's words, I can always ask them to put sticky notes up there. But if they do have to work out a problem or two, this is not going to be the end of the world. Now, for example, I'm using my mouse and I have terrible penmanship. So let's take a look here. I'm going to draw the letter M because that's the first thing I would write if I'm solving this particular problem. So I'll draw an M. And I just use my mouse for that. Now that's not hideous, and I could draw an equal sign, but it's not great. But again, if this is just one or two problems that I'm doing, and this is all that I have at my disposal, I at least have the functionality of using that. If I need to, I can switch to maybe the marker. Maybe that's a little bit better to read. It's a little thicker. And what I can do now is I can create the rest of this. So I'm doing this with my mouse. All right, and I would put the formula y2, whew, that's difficult, y1, but again, it's not hideous. I can still see it, over x2 minus x1. Okay, again, if I'm only doing this a couple times, it's not the end of the world. People can still see it. So I'll put an equal sign there, and then I will put in my values. So I have a 0, minus 2, whoop, and then I have a negative 2, minus 0, and that's going to be equal to negative 2 over negative 2, and that will equal 1. And then I can circle that. So again, this is not perfect, but it is doable. Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, I really kind of like this, I like the ability to use this, but I'm not crazy about the fact that I have to draw with my mouse. One of the things that you could do if you're on a computer that doesn't have a touchscreen and stylus is you could purchase a drawing pen tablet, and that will give you a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more control when you are drawing. For example, I have connected to my computer a 4-inch by 3-inch drawing pen tablet, and I use that every now and again when I need to be drawing on my screen. It's fairly inexpensive. It only costs $25. So if you're doing something like this for a very long time, you may want to consider investing in something very similar. Now, if you're curious, I will drop a link to the one that I'm using down in the description, so you can check that out later. Now, let me just show you how this works. I'm going to switch from my mouse over to my drawing pen tablet, but I'm going to grab the pen, and now when you see the mouse moving, that is actually what I'm using. So I'm no longer using my mouse. I'm using my pen and my tablet. And what I'm going to do first is grab this eraser, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to erase. All right. Now this does require a little bit of hand-eye coordination, and you may need to practice with it first. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but it's a decent solution. For $25, this really isn't bad. If I'm doing this for weeks on end with my students, especially in a remote learning situation that my school is in right now, this is really going to come in handy. So now I'll grab my pen. I prefer the marker, and I'm going to choose orange this time. And so I'm going to get my pen situated, and now I'm going to start drawing. So again, just remember, my penmanship is hideous to begin with. I'm a tech person. I've been typing for the last 20 years. I rarely write, so when I do, it's hardly legible as far as I'm concerned. My students manage somehow. But now I'm going to put a line here, and I'm going to say y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So it's a little bit better, and it's a little bit more fluid for me. All right, so I'm going to say that's equal to, and then I'll say y2 is 0 minus 2 over negative 2 minus 0. And now I can work that out. 0 minus 2 is negative 2 over negative 2 minus 0 is negative 2, and so that's equal to 1. And I can circle that. So that was much nicer for me. Even though my penmanship is hideous and this still looks a little scratchy, it's still quite legible as far as I'm concerned, and could be something that I easily use for one of my lessons. Before we finish, I do want to touch upon a couple other features which I really like about this. If we click the upper right hand side, we have a couple options, one of which is to download this as a PDF. So if you would like to have some kind of archive, you can go ahead and download that as a PDF, and that will give you a PDF of all of those slides. So I'm just going to go ahead and download that, and that's going to load up here in Adobe Reader for me, and you can see there are the slides that I have in my Jam. These are the pages, and I can see here exactly what we have. All right, so if you needed to utilize that, maybe print it out for somebody or store it for later usage, you can go ahead and do that. Then we can also save each frame as an image. So if you wanted to save this and then use it in some kind of presentation, or perhaps a student is going to use this and upload an image of what they created to Google Classroom or something of that nature, you can save the frame as an image, and it's just going to download right to your downloads folder. All right, that's only going to download each individual frame. So if I'm on frame 1, it's going to download frame 1. If I'm on frame 2, it will download frame 2. And you can kind of see that indicated by the file name, demo 1. So that would be demo with frame 1. One of the things you can also do is remove it. This is going to delete the entire Jam, so only use that if you really need to. And then if you have one Jam and you want to make a copy of it so that you can use it for something else, as a template, for example, you can go ahead and click Make a Copy. So one of the other features you have is sharing it, and you can share this just like any other Google Doc. You can share it with other people to collaborate with. Maybe you're giving them view permissions so they can see it. Maybe you're collaborating together on some kind of group project and you want multiple people to be able to edit it. It's a great way to brainstorm together. There's just so many uses for this. I'm sure your creativity can find a lot of different ways to make it beneficial to you. All right, so that's about it for the Jamboard. I hope you found this useful, and this gives you the skills necessary to implement this in your own situation.